was a 20-year war.
Right.
So we have Afghan interpreters, commandos, all these different, types, and that's it. Some of them have a 20-year relationship, with U.S. forces. What I'd like to move into a little bit now is, did you work as a Green Beret in Afghanistan?
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about how closely you work with the Afghan counterpart. Because, essentially, in civilian terms, what you guys do is you go in, you train up a team, and then you fight with that team just like you would fight with your own team.
Yeah, 100%.
Chaz and I spent hours and hours and hours watching those drone feeds, and in the days leading up to it as well. And all you saw was the Taliban outside the gates, just bam, 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 just civilian after civilian after civilian.
How many civilians do you think you saw executed by Taliban from drone feed?
From the drone feed, probably like 20 or 30 at least. And that was just in the short moments that I was in there. Saw a lot more in person.
What did that feel like, seeing that on drone?
What's the right word? I would say
those are our allies.
Yeah, it was saddening to watch. It was horrible to watch.
What is the leadership saying?
And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand, is that the relationships that we built with these people are not only measured in blood, but in years.
Yeah, we're talking 20 years.
20 years, 2 decades.
That's the life of raising a kid.
And understand too, Shawn, that there's only 6,500 Green Berets in the inventory, for example. And most of the special ops units have similar, they're small, right? And then when you split that across Iraq and Afghanistan, and we only had, we had 3rd group and 7th group that were primarily focused on Afghanistan, while 10th and 5th were focused on Iraq, and then you had the 1st that went back and forth. But the point is, you were either in Afghanistan or you were getting ready to go back. That was your life. That was your life in the special operations community. So you had a very small number of these individuals who were building these relationships.
Yeah.
You were there all the time.
That day was when you see all those videos of the guys holding on to the landing gear and the wheels and them falling out of the sky and crushing. My guys were on the ground there watching those people firsthand drop out of the planes. I know Dalton and my buddy Jake, they watched those bodies hit the pavement. They watched them hit the runway. They were there and had to control that crowd of thousands of people that broke into the gates, and just all of these unknown individuals rushed them. They spent, I think, 30 something hours clearing the airfield of all those people, and we have no idea who they are. Some are allies, some are not.
I helped put in place what was called the Village Stability Program, or Village Stability Operations, VSO. And it was basically where we worked with rural farmers, Pashtuns primarily, at a village level, similar to the CIDG program with the Montagnards in Vietnam. That was actually who inspired it with us. But it's kind of a modern day Magnificent Seven, right, where the teams would go into these villages and they would live in these villages. SEALs did some of it too in Zabul province. It was 2010. But we basically helped build local militias to stand up against the Taliban at village and community levels. And it spread all over Afghanistan in 2010, 2011, 2012.
When I was in the agency, if we were going to an outpost, it was, you're eating with them, you're working out with them, You're getting to know them. You're learning their culture, they're learning yours, you're sleeping next to them. It just becomes, it gets to the point where there is no difference between hanging out with your fellow Americans and your Afghan counterparts, because you're co-located in the exact same living conditions, living side by side with each other. Did you guys, same?
100%. You brought up, the way you characterized it, spot on. The only thing I would probably add to it is, for Green Berets, when you go through the Green Beret qualification course at Fort Bragg, no matter what you do, whether you're a weapons person or a captain or a team sergeant, whatever, when you go through this course, The culminating event is a role-playing exercise called Robin Sage. It's the largest role-playing exercise in the world. It covers 5 rural counties in North Carolina, and it's been going on since like 1952. And you parachute into this place, and it's a replicated insurgency. And you jump in, almost identical to what our teams did in Afghanistan, and you connect with the guy that owns the Subway shop in Dunn, North Carolina, is actually a leader of the resistance, and he drives you around in a cattle car at night. But he lives there. He's actually a resident. He's a 3rd-generation role player. The point is, we spend an inordinate amount of time training and inculcating in our operators the importance of immersing in the culture, the language, and the environment. And that is exactly what they do when they move into these communities. Like the Village Stability Program, our Green Berets grew their beards out, they're wearing indigenous clothing, they're speaking the language, they're living in a kalat in that village. You know, eating what the locals eat, shopping at the market. There is an expectation that you go local or you go home. You know, if you are working with the Afghan commandos, you wear their uniforms, you wear their patch. You go into combat with them. You are at their shoulder. And you don't necessarily want to be the first in the stack because you want them to build that capacity to do that, but you're in that stack. You know, and it becomes such a brotherhood, such a connection, that your whole purpose for being there, there's a saying in Special Forces, which is to work yourself out of a job.
This mashup is being sponsored by Goldco. Go to goldco.com/Ryan for your free investor's kit. Right now, there is this huge push for the digital dollar, or the central bank's digital currency, which would in turn make us a cashless society, which probably isn't a good thing. Here's a couple things to consider. When every dollar is gone, that means no extra cash for garage sales, no tooth fairy, no piggy banks. Every penny you spend could all be tracked and controlled. Of course, millions will call it a conspiracy theory, but we know those people always wind up on the wrong side of history, as we see in modern history. That's one reason why thousands of Americans are opting out of the system and putting some of their savings into gold and silver. To help you navigate that decision, you can go to goldco.com/Ryan, or you can call 855-336-0607 to get a free 2023 Wealth Protection Kit from my new sponsors at Goldco. This free kit shows you how you can protect your savings with physical gold and silver tax-free and penalty-free. Plus, you'll see how you could get up to $10,000 in free silver just for protecting your savings. So with the possibility of a digital dollar coming, at the very least, you want to be educated about your options. So go to goldco.com/Ryan or call 855-336-0607 to get their 2023 Wealth Protection Kit. That's goldco.com/Ryan. Performance may vary. Consult with your tax attorney or financial professional before making an investment decision.
You guys are going to, fight them coming out of the plane and stuff. And a funny moment was we come off the bird and it's the middle of the night and everyone's running out and immediately setting up a 360. And I'm just looking around and there's just calm as can be, right there on the airfield. And just in that immediate area where we landed, and this army soldier or this airman walks up with her Kevlar strapped to her pack or her plate carrier, walking up to us with a clipboard. "Hi guys, welcome to Afghanistan."
We tried to put a square peg in a round hole with Afghanistan. We tried to make it a top-down liberal democracy. And that's just not how that culture, that's not how that society is set up. It's not how it's operated. The way to maybe think about Afghanistan is, it's what they call a status society in many ways. It's a society where it's tribal in many ways. It's a clan honor-based society. So in other words, the way that country operates is in groups and clans and tribes. That's how and it's all about honor and shame. And the reason you see that in places like Afghanistan is that there's a huge amount of resource scarcity. So the way that you survive and that you navigate the world is you form groups. You form clans, you form tribes or quams. And that's how you survive. That's how you acquire. That's how you protect your resources. And it's a code of honor that allows that collective to function, that allows that collective to maintain its resources, acquire new resources, protect against other groups trying to take your resources. Every mammal on the planet has some version of this. And we all come from societies that do that. Afghanistan, in many ways, is still very true to that. If you go 4 feet off the pavement of Ring Road, the one paved road in that country, you're going to hit status society. I don't care which direction you go. The urban areas like Kabul, Kandahar, Jalalabad tend to be more progressive. You tend to see what they call contract society, which is what you and I know more readily. You know, it's some version of capitalism, some version of, you know, in this case, there was democracy that we helped instill, but it's more of a modern society that kind of focuses on the individual, not so much the group. So, you know, when you saw the United States come in there, well, let's back up. So the reality in Afghanistan is that this was a country largely status, ruled by a monarchy for years, and then in the 70s was, you know, the Soviets came in and toppled all of that. And they really targeted that rural leadership structure, the status society, the land-owning elders from these tribes were targeted primarily by the Soviets, and they were either killed or pushed out of the country. And so the Soviet occupation really flipped that whole country on its head and how it governed itself. And, you know, it created an insurgency that lasted for quite a few years. And then once they were pushed out, these warlords came in and filled the gap. Why? Because the tribal societies had been decimated by the Soviets.
1-8 had a sniper team up there already in like a small hide. And so we went up there, swapped out with them. And they were kind of updating us, just saying they were seeing people firing off rounds, like Taliban firing off rounds in the terminal and talking on phones and stuff. But I mean, everyone out there now has phones. So, you know, it is what it is. But we got up there, ripped out with them, and then guys started setting up more of a perimeter around the airport, literally just like almost entrenching along the airfield. And we observed the Taliban for that whole day, maybe a little bit into the next day. And
what were they doing?
Some of them were executing people in the civilian terminals on the far side. A couple of our guys had got, not our team, but a couple of the guys from Echo Company had gotten shot at. And at the time, it was like, if you get shot at, shoot back. Like that's what the ROEs, what we were told. And then those ROEs just started just dropping or going to the wayside. They were like, all right, don't do anything.
I had no idea. You know, I did not realize it until I started contracting for the agency. We tried that when I was a SEAL. We weren't trained in that kind of operations, and it just fell short. It didn't go great. But then when I went to the agency and I saw some of the GB teams and the Afghan teams that they were training, I had never seen it. I was just like, holy shit, these guys are switched the fuck on.
They really are.
They're kitted out. They know what they're doing. They're dedicated, and more dedicated than some of the Americans that I was working with.
No, I agree, man. Like one of the characters in my book, his name is Nizam, and Sergeant First Class Nizam Nizami. And, you know, he's a big part of the book, and he's a big part of my life. I met him in 2010 when we were doing that village stability mission I was telling you about. And the thing about Nizam, you know, this was a guy, just to give you, when you talk about the relationships, right? So his father was a Mujahideen fighter. He's Uzbek, and he was killed when Nizam was, I think, 4 months old. And then, like a couple of days later, MiG fighters bombed Nizam's village, and his house collapsed on top of him. Everybody ran out. They forgot the baby. Nizam was covered in debris. They dug him out, not a scratch on him, right? His mom was sold into slavery to a man that was like 3 times her age. He hated Nizam so much he wouldn't even let him sleep in the house. He slept in a barn till he was 11. Ran away from home, lived on the streets of Takhar. And when he was 17 and this Afghan National Army stood up that we talked about when the NATO forces came in, he joined it. And it was all he ever wanted to do, because it was, for him, it was a home. He had never had a home to call his own. You know, his aunt called him the backpack man, because he just moved around with his backpack as a kid. But he found a home in the Army. And then he joined, when he saw these Green Berets walking onto the base where he was working as a combat engineer private, just cleaning the floors and, you know, really doing nothing. He saw these commandos come walking onto the base with these bearded SF guys. And he looked at his buddy, he's like, man, I want to do that. And his buddy was like, the sergeant will sit on you if you even try to do that. Don't even try it. So he told the sergeant he had to take a piss, because they announced that they were going to meet in the classroom if you were interested in the recruiting. The sergeant, the mess hall sergeant he was working for, locked the door so none of the Afghan privates could get out and go to the meeting. So he told the fat sergeant, he said, I got to piss. And the sergeant's like, screw you, man. Get back to where you know, I really got to piss. And he was like, all right. So he opens the door, and the second he opened the door, Nizam bolted. You know?
Yeah.
He ran into that room sprinting, and everybody turned around and looked at him. Now he's like 5 foot nothing, weighs like a $105 soaking wet. He had to wear women's high heels just to meet the height requirements.
Are you serious?
I'm not even kidding. And the recruiter thought it was so funny that he let him in. But like, he ran into that room. You know, this is a guy who had lost everything. He had lived on the streets. He had never had a home to call his own. And he sprinted into that room with the commandos, and he sat down, and he never left. You know, he became a commando. He became Afghan Special Forces. He went to our Q course. He went to the Green Beret Q course at Fort Bragg. He was shot through the face when he turned around to tell the SF guys behind him, ambush, and was back in the fight 3 weeks later. He was shot in the chest plate 3 times by ISIS in a unilateral strike, you know, that they ended up winning. That's the kind of guy that almost every one of these commandos, special forces, KKA, were and are.
ROEs are
Rules of
don't
engagement.
shoot unless you get shot at.
Yeah.
You're literally, you showed me videos of this.
Yeah.
You're literally witnessing people get executed from all angles.
Yeah.
And then they make the ROEs even more strict on you.
Yeah. They
Who's
go.
telling you this? Where's this shit coming from?
It was a mix.
What is the leadership saying
But
as
it's-
they tell you
Yeah,
this?
so it's like battalion and higher. And for us, we were like, okay, well, so obviously we're in a more unique situation being in a sniper team. You know, what are we doing if we perceive a threat? And so now we have to request permission to engage. If we see someone getting shot or executed, we have to make sure that they are like an American citizen or an ally. And like, how the fuck are we supposed to know that when they've got someone on their knees with a gun to their head? And so we're there. And I'll jump more into the ROEs when we get to the Abbey gate, but we,
How many people do you think you saw executed in person?
myself, probably at least 50.
50 people.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was all primarily at Abbey gate, about 98% of it.
I think today you're right back at the same level of brutality that you saw.
Yeah,
at the
I
time.
mean, you know, when that pullout started,
yeah,
I had friends sending me videos of what they were doing to our guys and pictures, and by me and our guys, I mean our commandos.
Yeah, our partners.
You know, that are over there.
Yeah, it's terrible.
I
Still
remember
is.
there must have been 20 commandos lined up.
Yeah.
You know, hands behind their back, and they were just putting one round in the back of every one of their heads, just going down the line. It looked like fucking World War II.
Yeah.
You know, in a concentration camp.
You know, they'd come through in onesies and twosies, and we'd search them and then try and link them up with the State Department and get them processed. And a lot of the time it would just be the State Department saying, nope, they can't come through, send them back. And we'd send them back straight out to the Taliban. And a lot of them who get sent back, I mean, on the spot, I remember we watched this lady who walked around one of the shipping containers, metal pipe just comes and just bam, straight into the forehead and just out, gone, just like that. And I mean, at night it was the worst. They'd, you know, they knew there weren't as many eyes on them at night. And they'd line people up along the wall and just fucking execute them. There was like flashbangs that had to be used and stuff to try and crowd control. And we got the first couple hundred people set in place, and then we're slowly pushing into like the main part of the canal. Off of like the left edge of our tower, there was a chain link fence that ran out about 100 yards. And so then the canal was on the left side of that. And, I don't remember what day it was, but they brought those shipping containers out, and then they brought the ground force commander out to speak with the Taliban. I don't remember who specifically did it, but we were told that they paid the Taliban off to stop fighting us, pretty much, to stop like getting in our way. And what we were told is the rules in place were, leave us alone, we'll leave you alone if you let us take these people out. But there was nothing like, hey, to the Taliban that, hey, stop, like, if you fucking kill these people or execute them, we're going to do the same to you. And there was none of that in these agreements. So they had free will to do whatever they wanted out there. Yeah.
I'm fucking speechless right now.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was heavy. I mean,
People spent a lot of time over there, and a lot of those Afghans had our fucking back.
yeah.
And for the president of the United States to allow this shit to happen is fucking absurd.
Yeah,
And it gets worse.
Yeah, it does.
And it fucking gets worse.
Yeah. We,
You know, I'm going to try to... Never mind.
In the special operations community, certainly in the special forces community, there is an implicit promise in partner work, which is I have your back. You know, and we are raised to know that and execute on that at a very early age in special forces. Like for us in Rob and Sage, it's just grilled into you. And our operators for decades worked off that. I have your back. And it was just understood. So if a commando unit went in on a mission, there were SF guys right there at their shoulder. If the KKA went in on a mission, there were Rangers or SEALs right there at their shoulder. Like, it was just understood. And then all of a sudden, you know, really under two political administrations, this desire to just get out of the country, to get out of the war, completely dismissed these deep relationships that were in place, and frankly, that we bled for 20 years so that we didn't have another 9/11, so that we wouldn't have to rely on the over-the-horizon attacks that failed so miserably to prevent 9/11.
a lot of us have bled for a lot of those allies over there, but it's the same on their end. A lot of them have bled for us too. And, I mean, those shipping containers were put up. I typically would stay up on nights because, you know, I thought, all right, if they're going to do something, they're going to try something at night. If they're going to try and shoot us, attack us, blow us up, like, they're going to do it at night. That's when I would do it. And so I stayed up almost every night from sundown to almost sunup. And at one point I got so fed up. I was counting bodies over the net. Like, the Taliban have killed 2 people. The Taliban have murdered 3 people. They've executed 4, 5, 6. Like, I got fed up and kept requesting engagement authority, letting them know, like, what are we doing about this? And just like, you know, go about your job. That was what was passed down from the battalion or above the battalion. And I took 4 of our guys up to the Beret Hotel, like right next to the Taliban checkpoint, to get some footage of, like, up close of, like, the bodies and what they were doing over there. And so we walked up to the Beret Hotel, and there's just like this British version of a PFC or a private, and he's just like standing guard out front, and he's like, "What's your business here?" And I was just like, I mean, we got like a bunch of cameras and shit in our bags, and I was like, "It's classified." He's like, "Okay." Just like opens the door, and So, all right, well, that worked. And so we go in there, and it's like all of the British command. And I'm like, fuck, all right, just got to look like I know what I'm doing. Just like turned right, walked up on top of their Connex boxes there, and set up the guys on security and started taking pictures from this tower. And I have pictures of this too, of me doing this. And started taking pictures of the piles of bodies that were on the ground, the guys lined up on their knees against the wall, the women lined up against on their knees against the wall and stuff with guns pointed at their head.
And still, the Biden administration would not allow you to save these fucking people. They're literally on their knees facing the wall, getting shot in the back of the fucking head, one after another, and our president is not going to allow you to fucking engage.
We turned that footage over to the Joint Operations Command and to our intel assets that night, and got given a new SD card. And we're like, all right, go back out to the gate. And that was that.
You hear a lot after what happened in the collapse of what was the point? What was it all for? I can't tell you how many Gold Star families contacted me on August 15th, just through tears, asking, Scott, what did he die for? You know, buddies that called me, and you may have had the same thing, like, dude, what was all this for? Like, what was the point? And it was, you know, and I have to admit, I asked myself those questions as well. And I still see a lot of that, you know, in LinkedIn, and I get it. But I think you have to step back from that and really, I don't think it was in vain at all. I don't think the 20 years of sacrifice in that country was in vain. And here's why. And I'll hit it on a couple levels. First of all, the primary mission was to dismantle Al-Qaeda and prevent them from launching another strategic attack on the West or the United States. And I feel like our forces did that. You know, Al-Qaeda had a few other attempts, but for the most part, for 20 years, the West enjoyed relative peace and lack of Al-Qaeda influence at the scale at which they were capable of striking when 9/11 hit. And I think you have to attribute that to your brothers, my brothers, and everybody, conventional forces that served there to keep that organization off balance, at bay. And frankly, the Afghan commandos and special ops, they picked up the mantle starting in 2014 when OEF officially ended, Operation Enduring Freedom, and it became an Afghan-led endeavor. And again, you never hear that, but they took the lead. So Al-Qaeda was kept really off balance and unable to strike at a strategic level for 20 years. But also, you had, I think the number is close to 8 million boys and girls that attended school. You had 20 years of relative stability in that country. Time for informal civil society to get its feet under it again, for farming to reestablish itself. And I saw this through the Village Stability Program, through local agriculture, dispute resolution, mechanisms for that to start to, you know, to find its way again. You started to see elements of governance and economic development in that country. Now, granted, the graft and corruption and I think, frankly, Western biases that we brought in, the industrial war complex, it overshadowed a lot of that. But I don't think you can ignore the fact that a lot of these resilient systems did start to emanate out. It looks as if they're gone now, as if the Taliban have taken it over. I think the Taliban have a very fragile grasp on power.
Really?
I do.
Why do you think that?
Well, first of all, they're not good at governing. They suck at governing. The draconian measures that they're putting in place are as bad or worse than what they did before 9/11. But here's the difference. You didn't have 8 million young men and women that had attended school back then. You didn't have the millions of Afghans who had endured some level of relative stability, opportunity, it's particularly in the urban areas that you have now. You didn't have Uzbeks, Hazaras, and Tajiks who had finally enjoyed periods of non-persecution by Pashtuns. So there were a whole lot of social factors that were enabled to find some level of resilience in that 20-year period.
One memory of these, how desperate these people were to escape the Taliban, is this lady. We had to send her back out of the gate, and I don't remember who did it, but some individuals were taking her back out of the gate and go back into the crowd, and she jumps, like leaps at the razor wire and starts trying to cut her throat with the razor wire. She was like, if you send me back, they're gonna rape me, they're gonna fucking torture me, like kill me, and like a couple Marines grabbed her and prevented her from killing herself. But I mean, that's how fucking bad it is there. Like, she was willing to just slit her fucking throat on razor wire. Can you imagine that? It's not shit I ever could have made up. You know, I couldn't have dreamed about this shit. And I mean, it was unreal. Like I said, the crowd just continued to build up next to our tower. Finally, I want to say 2 days before the suicide bomber and the gunfight, and on the morning of, we took 2 impacts from the neighborhood on our window, like got shot at, like impact, and then crack, and shut the door. I climbed up the tower. Cooper was up there, and like right where his head was, there was 2 7.62 bullets that had impacted right next to him. Fortunately, the glass was bulletproof. I have pictures of that as well. And you know, we told command what was going on. Nothing came of it. They brought the Taliban up to our gate, and they brought a few of them up to our gate to crowd control. The ground force commander out there, the leadership out there allowed them.
I'm sorry, what?
They allowed the Taliban to come up to our gate.
U.S. leadership invited Taliban to come to the fucking gate to do crowd control.
Yeah.
Who is this?
There has been one public hearing with Congress about Afghanistan since all this happened. One. Everyone has been behind closed doors. Like, that question needs to be asked publicly, and there needs to be some accountability on it, because Shawn, we have the capability in the special operations community of this thing called Foreign Internal Defense, or FID. And it's a capacity building approach where you go into at-risk, under-governed countries and you build partner capacity, right? Now, you don't need 100,000 dudes to do it like we did in Afghanistan and Iraq. A small residual force like SF or the Marine Special Ops, who are trained expeditionary diplomats, and let them go in there over the long haul. We've been in Colombia for 50 plus years, and no one knows that, but you've had 7th Group guys down there 365, 24/7, and SEALs for 50 years, building the Colombian special ops capability. You know, and even in the 90s, when I started working there, the Colombians wouldn't leave the base, you know, but now they fly at night. They were actually advising Afghans in Afghanistan, and they flew Afghans over to Colombia to see what they were doing, but it took decades. Yeah. You know, and we don't think about the long game anymore. You know, and the reality is, if we're going to set up antibodies to violent extremism like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, or even be a buffer to the Russians and the Chinese, local approaches, local resilience is going to be key. And building that capacity from the ground up. So back to your question, why didn't we? I mean, you had the general officers like Miller saying, hey, a 2,500 person residual force in country to include a CT capability is essential. What I'm disappointed in those generals and others is they did not recommend a FID capability as well. Like, yes, you should have like a hammer, you know, I don't know, half a squadron of SEALs or Delta, but you should also have SF guys and other advisors working with the commandos, working with the KKA, so that you have that capacity, because they're the ones really doing the striking. So I'm thinking 5K. We could have maintained that for, you know, an indefinite period of time in Afghanistan, and it would have held.
Yeah.
Countless Afghans were murdered by the Taliban 155 yards in front of our position, day and night. With only shipping containers between us, the Taliban would routinely murder people under our observation at their checkpoint. We communicated the atrocities to our chain of command and intel assets, but nothing came of it. The troops on the ground had to tirelessly work to control the crowds day and night. Department of State staff in HKIA would completely shut down processing Afghans every evening and into the morning, leaving ground forces with a nightmare. They did not work in reasonable rotations and very much presented an unwillingness to work in other situations as well. No matter our health or condition, the Marines stood watch and engaged in disorderly and dangerous crowds. State was not prepared to be in HKIA. In fact, State would not want to deal with the Afghans unable to be processed, weakening the security of the perimeter. State would take us away from our mission to walk Afghans out to meet the fate of the Taliban, condemning them to death. The Taliban grew in numbers and strengthened their position around HKIA with gun trucks while having occasional visits by Taliban leadership. On August 22nd, an improvised explosive device, IED, probe took place down in the canal running along the perimeter of HKIA. This was ISIS, or the Taliban, performing an IED test run. We reported this to our chain of command. Days later, we received word to be on the lookout for 2 vehicle-borne IEDs, described as a gold or white Corolla and a green Mazda convertible. Around 2 a.m. on August 26th, intel guys confirmed the suicide bomber in the vicinity of and nearing Abbey Gate, described as clean-shaven, brown-dressed, black vest, and traveling with an older companion. I asked the intel guys why he wasn't apprehended sooner since we had a full description. I was told the asset could not be compromised. Throughout the entirety of the day on August 26, 2021, we disseminated the suicide bomber information to ground forces at Abbey Gate. He was spotted somewhere from noon to 1 p.m. by myself, then Sergeant Charles Schilling, and another. The anomaly in the crowd, who was clean-shaven and fit the description exactly, traveling with an older gentleman. The individual was consistently and nervously looking up at our position through the crowd. The older of the two wore a black silky hijab that was covering his face most of the time. They both had obvious mannerisms that go along with who we believed him to be. They handed out small cards to the crowd periodically, and the older man sat calmly and seemingly coached the bomber. Over the communication network, we passed that there was a potential threat and an IED attack imminent. This was as serious as it could get. I requested engagement authority while my team leader was ready on the M110 semi-automatic sniper system. The response, leadership did not have the engagement authority for us. Do not engage. I requested for the battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Brad Whited, to come to the tower to see what we did. While we waited for him, psychological operations individuals came to our tower immediately and confirmed the suspect met the suicide bomber description. He eventually arrived and we showed him our evidence, the photos we had of the 2 men. We reassured him of the ease of fire on the suicide bomber. Pointedly, we asked him for engagement authority and permission. We asked him if we could shoot. Our battalion commander said, and I quote, "I don't know," end quote. Myself and my team leader asked very harshly, "Well, who does? Because this is your responsibility, sir." He again replied he did not know, but would find out. We received no update and never got our answer. Eventually, the individual disappeared. To this day, we believe he was a suicide bomber. We made everyone on the ground aware. Operations had briefly halted, but then started again. Plain and simple, we were ignored. Our expertise was disregarded. No one was held accountable for our safety. About 1730, Staff Sergeant Darren Hoover, friend and mentor, came to get me from the tower to go help find an Afghan interpreter in the crowd. We found the interpreter and his brother, born with American passports. They told us of 5 family members still in the canal. I stayed there waiting for the family members, standing against a 2-foot canal wall. 10 minutes passed. Then a flash and a massive wave of pressure. I'm thrown 12 feet onto the ground, but instantly knew what had happened. I opened my eyes to Marines dead or unconscious, lying around me.
I'd like to start with a question. What does an American promise mean today? There's a promise in the military that is both explicit and implicit. I have your back. We were trained that way. It's in our blood. But in August 2021, the leaders who held us to that standard went silent while our Afghan allies were left behind. The U.S. government may not have had the backs of our Afghan allies, but our veterans did. For as long as we've been a nation, our veterans have been a moral compass for doing the right thing, especially in hard times. As we try to figure out where to go from here, I suspect we're going to need that moral compass more than ever. You won't find many veterans sitting out here today who relish being involved in this Afghan evacuation. We paid our dues, and we tried to move on with our lives. I know jumping back into the quagmire of Afghanistan was certainly not part of my military retirement plan. But like thousands of other veterans across the country watching Kabul collapse on August 15, 2021, I received a phone call from a friend that absolutely crushed me. "I'm not afraid to die," he said to me. "I just don't want to die alone." Those were the words that dragged me back into the Afghanistan conflict. His name was Sergeant First Class Nezamuddin Nizami, but I just called him Nizam. His father was a Mujahideen fighter who was killed by the Soviets when he was 4 months old. He had no money, no family, no hope. Yet somehow he became an Afghan commando, one of the elite warriors who were trained by U.S. Special Operations to do really 95% of the fighting in the country. Green Berets, including me, who worked with Nizam, we loved him like a brother. He volunteered for every mission, every day. He was family. But despite numerous inquiries to the State Department, Congress, and even Army Special Operations headquarters about his SIV status, Kabul was falling and no one was coming to help him. This was a guy who was shot through the face, protecting U.S. Green Berets from a Taliban ambush. And for me, he was the same guy that even while he was being hunted and texted by the Taliban, would call me to ask how my kids were doing. Over the next few weeks, I assembled a small team of volunteers, mostly veterans from across the country, that we called Task Force Pineapple, to guide Nizam and hundreds more to safety. We didn't have any resources or battlefield access or time, but we had something that a lot of people didn't: relationships and trust. We used cell phones, knowledge of the terrain, and an encrypted chat room to guide at-risk commandos and their families at night, navigating through that suffocating crowd, through an open sewage canal, and then into position to link up with known NATO service members like Aiden, who were standing watch near a 4-foot hole in the perimeter fence. Pineapple wasn't the only group. There were hundreds of ad hoc volunteer groups doing similar work, many of them sitting out here today. From breakfast tables to basements across the world. Jane, a Gold Star wife who lost her husband Chris in Afghanistan. Will, a double amputee, fighting to save the interpreter who saved his life on the battlefield. And dozens, even hundreds more. We helped hundreds of allies, but thousands were left behind, and at great cost to this vulnerable veteran population who had already given so much. My buddy Steve, who was racked with post-traumatic stress and a traumatic brain injury from an IED, screamed into his pillow and pounded his bed because his children were in the next room. As his former interpreter was detained at a Taliban checkpoint and was pleading over the phone, "Steve, they are beating my wife. My children are watching this, for God's sakes. What should I do? Can I fight them? Why is this happening?" Jay, a former Navy SEAL in Pineapple, received a text on Signal from his Afghan partner. "My daughter has been trampled, sir. I know we're going to miss our chance to escape, but she's unconscious and barely breathing." It's okay, my friend. Thank you for trying. This whole thing has been a gutting experience. I never imagined I would witness the kind of gross abandonment, followed by career-preserving silence of senior leaders, military and civilian. As a result of the way that we've left Afghanistan, we're on the front end of a national security crisis, as 27 violent extremist groups are now operating on former NATO security bases with Taliban top cover.
Suicide bomber detonates near Abbey Gate. 13 service members killed, 11 Marines, 1 sailor, 1 Army soldier, 170 Afghans killed just in the blast. 45 U.S. military personnel wounded. You lost your right arm, your left leg, missing parts of multiple organs, 43 surgeries, 54 units of blood, and you still have 13 ball bearings and 2 pieces of shrapnel stuck in your body.
Oh, that is correct.
So let's roll into the 26th.
It was the most devastating, it was humiliating.
Yeah.
To watch that. So that, coupled with the call that I knew was coming, from Nizam, and he said, sir, they're looking in my window right now. And he's like, I'm not going to make it. And for me in that moment, all I could think about were, you know, the 23 buddies that I'd lost over the years, over 20 years. Over my buddy, you know, Romy Camargo, who's a warrant officer in SF, who's paralyzed from the neck down. He's on a ventilator. You know, so many of my friends have taken their lives, and I just thought, fuck, man. You know, why does this kid have to die? Like, it's not right. And everything in my life in that war came down to him and whether he lived or died. That was it. I didn't give a fuck about anything else. I just didn't.
They're like, he's a younger individual, probably clean shaven, wearing a brown man dress with some like black outer garb of some sort and a black bag, and traveling with an older individual who is probably the guy kind of guiding him to do this. And my first reaction, I was like, how the fuck do we have an exact description of this guy? I was like, if we have an exact description of this guy and we know that he's coming to Abbey Gate, that means you have a motherfucker watching him. You have someone watching him, someone operating in the AO, or who knows where he's going to be. Why are we not stopping him before he gets to us? And we were just told the intel asset couldn't be compromised. And
unfortunately, that's the only fucking thing I agree with so far.
yeah.
That's the only decision I agree with, because you know why? Because the intel never stops. He's an insider.
Yeah. Yeah. And
that's why.
yeah.
It's our job to eliminate the bomber.
Those hard decisions have to be made.
Yeah.
But like, that's a great way to put it, is we're told these things so we can stop what's happening.
But our leadership denied it.
Yeah. And so we go back out to the gate. And obviously at the time, you know, we're all kind of thinking like, for us, it's like, why the fuck wouldn't we do something? Wouldn't they do something earlier? But that's a great way to explain it. And so we go back out to the gate, and I mean, we're not that we weren't hyper vigilant before, but I mean, even more so now, and as much as we could be looking for this dude. And we let everyone, all the ground forces know, like, hey, this guy's out here. This is what he looks like. This is who he's probably going to be with. You know, keep an eye out. And obviously we're up in an elevated position, scanning this crowd of thousands and thousands of people.
I said to him something to the effect of, look, you're not going to die alone. You're not going to die at all. We're going to get you out, man. You're going to get across that city. You're going to get through the crowd. You're going to get past the Taliban. You're going to get past the Marines. You know, we're going to get you on a plane. You're going to come to the States. You're going to live next to me. We're going to be neighbors. I remember saying
shit,
that.
You said that.
I did. Because I needed to say something that would just give him some kind of hope. But then and he kind of laughed. He has this hyena-like laugh, this little high-pitched laugh, and he's like, okay, sir. And we hung up the phone, and I just looked at my wife, and I was like, what did I just do? I just made him a promise that I don't know if I can keep it. And my wife said, you'll keep it.
She backed you.
Oh, 100%. And, you know, we had tried so hard to put the war behind us with our play and everything else that we had done. I didn't want to get involved in this thing. I really didn't. But at that point, I knew I was in, and I was in pretty deep. And so I just started calling buddies that knew Nizam, that had fought with Nizam, that knew him the way I knew him. Some of them were on active duty. Some of them were retired. Not that many, like 5, you know. And we decided to do it. We decided let's try to get him out, you know. And there's no way we could get over there. That wasn't going to happen. Plus, we'd just get in the way. so we decided to just do it remote. You know, could we leverage our networks? Could we leverage our relationships inside Kabul International Airport? You know, could we use the Jamiat Islami network to get him a cab to move him through the city? Like, so we just started putting a plan together. And
Where did you start?
I started by,
I mean, that's a huge. That's a lot of logistics.
yeah, and
Halfway around the world.
it was overwhelming in the sense of like, you know, because here's the thing is like, you know, in my role in special forces over the years, like I did have the opportunity to, you know, obviously work alongside commandos and tactical missions, but a lot of what I did in the latter years of my life in SF in Afghanistan was to command and control remote operations of special forces and SEALs and other groups, and I was pretty good at it. Like that was what I did. I ran those operation centers, I planned, executed, controlled missions, and I lost a lot of friends doing that shit. That were on that died doing what I asked them to do or what they counted on me to help them do, you know, and you know, you don't get over that, right? You know, you never forget that, and I didn't care if I ever did that again, because there's just something, because you're away from it, but yet you're hearing their voices over the radio, and it's the stuff that that medevac's supposed to be there, that aircraft's supposed to be there, those enemy forces weren't supposed to be there, you know, and it was right back at that again, except this time, no resources, no authority, no ISR, no access and placement, none of the things that you need to command and control a good operation.
Yeah.
You had none of it.
Some of the PSYOPs, the psychological operations guys, individuals, the Army guys, they come up to our tower and we show them the pictures that we have and who he is. And I mean, this whole time he's working closer towards us, and we pass over the net like that we've got this, you know, this possible threat, and that we're linking up with the PSYOPs guys to get, you know, another set of eyes on him. And for us, we're like, this is the fucking guy. The PSYOPs guys are like, yeah, that's him. That's the exact fucking description that we have. Like that's who we think it is too. And we're like, okay, cool. And so we pass over the net. That too, we're, you know, requesting engagement authority. I was spotting. Chaz was on the gun, and then someone else took over for spotting, and I was on the net. I was just on the radio, you know, requesting engagement authority for this individual, giving them the description, getting denied, and then the counter intel guys, some counter intel individuals, they came up to our tower, and we showed them the photos as well. So now this is the third group of individuals. This is like 12 sets of eyes now on these pictures.
12 PIDs.
Yeah. And they're like, yep, that he fucking fits the description, and so does the older guys traveling with. Like, that's who we think he is too. And we're like, all right, well, that's fucking 3 separate fucking entities that think the same exact thing. You know, fucking Dalton, he's always got a saying like, if it walks like a duck, it acts like a duck, it's probably a fucking duck. And I passed it over the net again. Like, hey, we have confirmation for 3 separate entities. I'm requesting engagement authority on this individual. American lives are going to be at stake if he continues to fucking come up here. And we had watched him. I didn't get to portray it fully in front of Congress, but we were watching him for a couple hours, like quite a few hours, still continuously requesting engagement authority. And finally, it's like, no, like engagement authority is denied. And I was like, who has it? Or we don't have the, they're like, we don't have the engagement authority to give you. And I was like, well, send the battalion commander up here, because we're going to shoot this guy if you don't. And obviously in our eyes, right? And I said this to Congress too. I said, even if this was a potential, if this was possible, if it wasn't the guy, the fucking bomber in the crowd is going to think twice about fucking doing what he's about to do, because he watched some dude's fucking chest get caved in, because he watched this dude just get taken out. He's going to know that we're watching. He's going to know that when he does come into view, we're going to fucking deal with him. We're going to put him down, because bad people need to be put down. That's what our job is. And not what our job is, but that's what we're supposed to do in that situation with those individuals. And 300-yard shot is an easy shot to take from a stable platform with high-powered optics and fucking long guns.
Not to mention with everything else that's going on around it.
Yeah.
All the executions, dead babies, women trying to cut their own throats on razor wire.
Yeah.
That's how bad it is. And they're denying you permission to take this guy out.
On top of allowing the Taliban to come up and work next to Marines.
Yeah.
And so they say, all right, the battalion commander's on his way. At this point, I mean, this dude's closer. He's within like 200 yards, 150 yards now, or maybe even closer than that. And the battalion commander comes up, Lieutenant Colonel Brad Whited, and he comes up to the tower. We show him the photos, and he's just kind of sitting on, the heels of his feet, like, well, and we're like, well, sir, do we have your permission to engage? Like, we've had counter intel, psychological operations, and ourselves positive ID on this guy. This is the description. And he was like, well, yeah, it does look like it, but I don't have that authority.
So I went to my office and I drew a course of action sketch on the board. I started with his safe house, the map. I had just a rough map I kind of had of the area. I indicated Taliban checkpoints along the, trying to just think of what were the things just at a templated level that he was going to face from his safe house all the way to the United States. And once I did that, though, I actually felt better. Once I got it up on the board, I'm like, oh my God, like this is impossible. But at least I see what it is. And then I took a picture of it, sent it to the other guys, and they're like, and we could start talking about something that was tangible at that point, even though it was extremely difficult. And we just started breaking it up into chunks. Like, okay, like how are we going to move him across the city? And I was thinking, well, I've got a good set of relationships in Kabul. The Jamiat Islami network, the old Northern Alliance network of Mujahideen fighters, like it's still strong. And I know people that are connected to that. We could get him a cab that'll move him with a Pashtun driver that knows the area, that has done the routes. And we did. And then we just took it chunk by chunk. We were like, well, he can move through the crowd. He's a friggin' commando. Like he'll get, and he's little, But what about, how are we going to get him past the guards? Who do we need to talk to there? What are we going to do that he doesn't have a visa? Like, how are we going to get him manifested? And people just took different chunks of it. And, we do what we do.
10 minutes goes by and just flash and just get hit with this massive wave of pressure, just like straight on. And then I'm like, my eyes are closed, my vision's black, and I'm like slowly coming to. My right ear is just like super high pitched ringing. My left ear is muffled, and I can just hear people screaming in the distance. And I knew right away, as soon as I was coming to, I was like, holy fuck. Like I just got fucking blown up. And my brain knew instantly. And my immediate thought was just like disbelief. I was like, there's no fucking way this just happened. And I can't see yet. And I'm just like struggling to open my eyes. And I later come to find out, on top of a fucking 20, 30 pound bomb detonating like 5 meters away from me, someone's CS gas canisters had exploded on all of us. And so on top of the bomb, there's all the CS gas cloud that we're engulfed in. And so none of us can fucking see or we're struggling to see. And so I was just like, holy fuck, like I actually just got blown up. And I finally can open my eyes, and I'm just like laying on the ground in the dirt looking to my left and like really close to the fence. Like I had almost gotten thrown to the fence. And I'm like looking to my left, and there's just where this crowd of hundreds of people was is just flattened, like nothing at all. And I can still hear people just fucking screaming in the distance and yelling. And I look to my left, and one of the first things I see is just fucking Marines laid out, just fucking Desert Marpat fucking next to me. And I was just like, oh fuck, like this really just fucking happened. And before I fully, my brain fully registered everything when I woke up in the hospital. Like my mom said I talked for 9 hours straight, but I thought I was crawling away from my leg, and it was someone else's fucking body part just laying in front of me.
Jesus
there was fucking
Christ.
body parts and dead bodies everywhere. And the people on the other side of the canal, just immediately in front of me, just got fucking evaporated, or eviscerated, just gone, just in an instant, gone. And then outside of that, just body parts, fucking guts and pieces of people and human beings. And I was laying on the ground, and I mean, I felt like I was on the ground for like a fucking hour. I felt like forever. And almost immediately after the bomb, I was trying to stand up, and I couldn't stand up. I could like move my head forward and like move my arm a little bit, and I kept trying to stand up, and like, fuck, like, why can't I stand up? And I was like, I'm fucking hurt. And then it just like crack, 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 fucking right across from us. So I'm now facing like kind of like the tower, like the way I'm looking, like the tower's kind of to the left, the canal's like right here, and then the neighborhood's right here. And we start taking fucking shots from the neighborhood, and like almost immediately after the blast. And my first thought, I mean, I always say like, we all want to be the hero in our own story, but my first thought in my brain was like, fuck, I'm hurt. And I look down, and I'm hearing us getting shot at and hearing fucking cracks and impacts behind us and over us. And I'm like, fuck, I can't fire my weapon. I'm fucked up. Like I mean, I had come to find out I had gotten hit with 100 to 150 ball bearings. And
150 ball bearings.
Yeah.
We were putting together this plan for Nizam, and Mike called me, and he said, Scott, he's got to go now. And I was like, what? Dude, we don't even have a plan yet. Like, he's going to burn his safe house. It's broad daylight. And Mike said, I've got a feeling, man. I'm watching the news. I'm watching how things are falling. The Taliban are actually going to be security partners with the Neo forces. Like, if we don't get him in on the inside of that Taliban ring, they're going to check his credentials, and he's dead. He's got to go now. I was like, fuck. Because, we didn't have a full plan. We didn't have a way for him to get in. All we had really was a way to get him to the edges of the airfield. And then we were going to have to figure out the rest as we went. And that was when it was like,
shit.
And so that's what we did. And we told him, brother, you're going to have to go. You're going to have to go now. And he said, okay, sir. And I don't know, man. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I think that's probably the hardest thing about this whole thing, is that so many of us, we heard those words a lot, and they didn't get out.
Yeah.
They died in the ISIS blast, or they were executed, or they're still there. It's one thing when you have memories of brothers or things that happened and it was bad. Like there was, but when they say, yes, sir, got it, moving, and that's the last time you hear from them, man, you never get over that. And that's what this really came down to. Like, yeah, we got Nizam out and others, but there were thousands that were counting on us.
Yeah.
And we just couldn't do it. It was just too big. It's like my buddy Duke says, it was an Uncle Sam-sized problem that we were trying to solve with our cell phones and checking accounts. That's a hell of a thing to put on guys that fought for 20 years.
That's heavy. That is heavy.
Yeah. But, we got him to the airfield, and he is such a resilient guy.
Well, before we go into the airfield, let's talk about let's talk about his journey. How long did it take? What did you do?
So, the thing is here's another thing that was interesting is we told him, take pictures of all your certificates and your tabs. He went to the Q course, so he has like an SF tab.
Okay.
And the certificate of completion. And we said, take pictures of all that, send it to us. We're going to upload it on the cloud. Wipe your phone and burn all that stuff. So he starts a fire out in the backyard. That's actually how my book starts, is him burning all his stuff. When he got to the SF tab and the certificate, he couldn't burn it. So he stuffed it down in his gym bag. And the crazy thing is, I interviewed dozens of commandos, KKA, Afghan Special Forces. not one of them burned their stuff when we told them to. They all carried it.
Wow.
I knew I was fucking bad. I could see myself covered in blood. And the pain hit me probably like a minute or two afterwards. And I was just like, when it finally hit me, because I couldn't feel it for a while, and it finally hit me, I was like, I was in so much pain that I just wanted to fucking die. Like, I remember laying there on the ground, and I was just like, please fucking kill me. Like, I'm in so much pain, just please fucking put me out of my misery. That's like all I was thinking about. And then I just kept trying to move, and I couldn't. And as I'm fading, I'm like, man, yep. I was like, well, that's how it goes. And that's like all I really thought. I was just like, well, I'm dead, but I'm proud of what I've done and who I am. And I remember thinking that on the ground, and it was like, this is how it is. And I was in disbelief, but I wasn't scared. I just was like, wow. I was like, well, this is how it fucking is. Like, I'm gonna die here on the dirt in Afghanistan. And I just hear I hear Tyler, coming, buddy. And I like come to again, and I'm like, oh fuck, it's Chaz. Like, he's gonna fucking get to me. I'm not gonna die.
To close it out, I want to know what your opinion is on what is the effect of the Afghan withdrawal going to do to global terrorism?
Yeah, I think that's the right question to ask. I mean, there's a lot in that, and I'll try to unpack it just as succinctly as I can. And here's some things I think that are worthy of considering as people make up their own mind of what, does Afghanistan really matter in the scheme of things? This little, dusty ass country in Southwest Asia that no one has really heard about until 9/11. I think that it does. It matters to everyday Americans. It matters to people who are raising their kids. And whether you have memory of 9/11 or not, here's why I think it matters and what the impact is going to be on global terrorism. First of all, we may think that we're done with Al-Qaeda and ISIS, but they're not done with us. The enemy, we're taught in special operations, always has a vote in the outcome of the plan. You may make the best plan in the world, but the enemy gets a vote on how that happens. And in this case, global terror groups like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, they have a narrative that drives them to action that they follow for centuries, right? We may come and go with political polarization and political administrations, our narrative changes, our goals change. It's not true for Al-Qaeda and ISIS. They have a goal to reestablish the Islamic Caliphate. They have a goal to unseat and destroy the apostate governments of the Middle East and the great Satan in the West. That does not change, right? They may get decimated and experience degradation like what happened with the 20-year war in Afghanistan and the ISIS campaign in Syria, but they do not lose the focus on their narrative, and they are very patient and very committed. What you're seeing right now in Afghanistan is a complete return to where we were pre-9/11.
There was so many fucking people killed that Andrew was on the gun and like on the SAS when the blast went off, and they got fucking rocked. I mean, that whole blast wave was right next to the tower, and they aimed it at us and the tower, and that's what happened. So all that overpressure from the blast ran through the fucking tower. We had 2 windows open. It was just like boom, boom, fucking instantly, just fucking, I don't know, shook their brains, instant concussion, and they were rattled. Andrew like barely held on to the SAS hanging out the window, and they thought that their fucking faces were bleeding, and it was just so much blood and guts from the people that had gotten blown up because they were fucking like at the window that it was just covering their fucking face. And I mean, the SAS was fucking caked in blood. They had to clean fucking brains off our SAS after that because of how many fucking people were killed. It coated our fucking rifle, one of our rifles. And I mean, I'm sure that fucking haunts him, I mean, that's some heavy fucking shit. And so Chaz and Dalton like had the briefest engagement of like, Chaz is going out there to get me because he's the most fucking proficient medically. And like, as he saw me, he's like, hey, I'm going out there or whatever. And fucking, that's when he was yelling for me, and I was like, wow, I'm not gonna fucking die. Chaz is gonna get to me. And I remember hearing him run behind me along the chain link fence and hearing him yell my name. And then I remember seeing him stand over me, and he told me like he thought I was dead because I was just like looking at him. And I said something along the lines of like, take off my fucking belt, take off my fucking Kevlar.
I'll leave you with this scenario. Let's assume that 2 to 3 years from now, we suffer a strike in the U.S. and it's on par with 9/11. And I don't think that's a stretch, considering the level of freedom of action that Al Qaeda and ISIS-K are being afforded in Afghanistan, right? So let's just assume that an attack happens here, and it is catastrophic. And out of the ashes, and when the dust clears, you have an America that is reminiscent of 9/12/2001. The country music songs are playing, the Budweiser commercials are going strong, the yellow ribbons are on the trees, except this time it's, you know, your son and mine that are loaded up on these airplanes, on these C-17s, and are deployed over for a retribution operation in Afghanistan to seek vengeance and oust this group that just did this. Now, last time, you had members of the special operations community that went in under cover of darkness, and they linked up with resistance groups like the Northern Alliance and the Pashtun tribes in the south and the east. But what if this time, when our youth are going over, laying in wait are dozens, if not hundreds, of former Afghan commandos, special forces, who are in ragtag clothing, but they still have the kit. They still have the M4s with optics and the night vision goggles. And they're pissed off because they watched their kids starve to death over 3 years. They've been co-opted by ISIS or Al-Qaeda, and they're ready for some payback. And the very partner force that we trained and supported and bled with could be the people that we're fighting the next time we go back in there.
They started going around destroying all of the equipment and all of everything they could think that would be useful, destroying, spray painting everything across HKIA, and came back from the ground force commander that the vehicles that had been flipped over and the spray paint that said "fuck you Taliban, fuck ISIS" needed to be covered up. The vehicles needed to be flipped back over. They needed to fix the damage like to those vehicles and things that they had done. So after these 13 service members are killed, after they're tasked with destroying everything so the Taliban and ISIS don't have access to it, they're then told by ground force commander to fix that damage.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I wish I wasn't. So they went back, told to fucking cover it up with spray paint, told to fucking flip those vehicles back over. And, I mean, man, it's just like, it's one fucking thing after another post that. And I can't fathom why we can't change the fact that these 13 service members were killed. So why the fuck do you have to lie about what happened? Why do you have to lie about what happened, what we experienced, what everyone out there went through, what we saw? How can John Kirby stand and say, as the press representative from the White House, how can he stand there, and being a former admiral in the Navy, how can he stand there and say that he didn't see any fucking chaos from his perch? And that's quote, "I didn't see any chaos from my perch." Who the fuck talks like that from your perch? Who talks like that? Who fucking says that? 13 Americans were killed. And you're going to speak like that and say that everything was done right, that you couldn't see any fucking chaos from your perch. It's fucking disgusting.
I'm sorry, man.
Yeah. It's not your fault.
I'm sorry.
But it's someone's.
Hey everybody, I'm Shawn Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Shawn Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.